Well, hello, everybody. I know we're still stuck in the intro. Here we go. And I'm wondering what's going on here. Thanks, Dr. Glover, for your patience while this intro rolls through. And hi, Lisa. Dorota's here. Sherry DeWitt. Hi, everybody. Great to see you all. And there we go. Dr. Glover, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing well. I'm actually having a little technical difficulty. I don't know why we are.
It could be my karma. I did a call with somebody 2 weeks ago where they hooked with Zoom to Facebook, and that they couldn't make it work first time either. So maybe I'm dragging something around with me.
I don't think so. I think that we are just we are going to move through this. Here's what's going to happen is that I think our names are going to be. I'm going to switch our names here because it looks like I think that'll work. Now our names are in the right place, and we're on live. Great to have you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. All these folks are joining in. Thank you so much, everybody, and welcome to Rise Up, which is my great joy to be a part of this evolutionary conversation. Conversations from the emerging paradigm. And today it is my great pleasure to have Dr. Robert Glover with us. Dr. Glover is the author of No More Mr. Nice Guy and Dating Essentials for Men. His website, drglover.com, features numerous online self-help courses, workshops, podcasts, groups, and trained coaches and therapists. For 25 years, Dr. Glover has focused on helping men live with purpose and passion and to get the love that they want. Dr. Glover currently lives in beautiful Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Yes, Viva Mexico! And welcome, Dr. Glover. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the invitation. It's good to be here.
Such a pleasure. You know, I have to tell you, I found your book maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I know you've been working for a lot longer than that. And not only do you have the online courses, but you're doing, and have for many years been doing, courses in person, workshops for men. I have to just say personally the book was very impactful. I found a lot of ways in which I could identify activities and ways of being. And I want to get into that, but I would like to ask you first, can you describe the nice guy syndrome?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and my book was written primarily for men, but I know we have women listening, so everything I say, I'll reference men and women both. But since I mainly work with men these days, that's where my vocabulary usually goes. But a nice guy is a person who doesn't believe he's okay just as he is. And so he typically is unconsciously trying to do two things: become what he thinks other people want him to be in order to be liked and loved and get his needs met, and hide anything about him that he think might get a negative reaction from anybody. So this again, it can apply to men and women as well. So unfortunately, nice guys, nice girls are pretty chameleon-like and often pretty frustrated in life. And often the people trying to be close to them get pretty frustrated with them as well.
So one of the things that really I found so interesting is at Rythmia, our teachings on core wounding is basically a very similar, what was revealed through the plant medicine is a very similar teaching, that there's something that that occurred in life, and I believe you do go into this in the book in depth, something in the early life that occurred that had us believe who we are isn't enough, based on our self-centered aspect as children. The world revolves around us. So if I didn't get fed on time, if I didn't get held on time, or anything on the spectrum of abuse, it could be something benign or very traumatic, we say, well, who I am right now isn't enough, and project out an idea of what we think we need to be in order to get our needs met. So this is the fundamental mechanism of the nice guy syndrome. How does it differ, or how does that to me, I'd love to know how that is different from the general expression of the soul splitting for all of mankind, because it happens to
Sure.
everybody, to humankind, but it doesn't always end up as the nice guy syndrome.
Right. And you're right. It does happen to everybody, and you capsulized that very well. So yeah, let me just talk a little bit more about that. We'll go a little bit more in depth, and then we'll talk about anybody who's listening, how it affected their view of self and their view of the world. And yes, when we were born, we are completely dependent, completely needy, completely vulnerable, and we're dependent on other people to make sure our needs are taken care of. One of the things I learned in Child Development 101 in grad school is that children are also basically, for lack of a better term, narcissistic and grandiose. They believe that they know no separate self of them from other, so they believe they're the cause of everything that happens to them, for good or for bad. And a child's number one fear is abandonment, because abandonment for a child means death. So what we all do with any early experience we have, we start internalizing that and trying to make sense of it using a very underdeveloped, very immature mind and brain. Now, at a very early age, the primary part of our brain that is completely online and working is a part called the amygdala. It's a very primitive part of the human brain. It's on the brain stem. And it controls things like respiration, heartbeat. It's what activates the fight, flight, freeze mechanism that helps keep us alive. And the theory is it stores up emotional memory beginning probably pre-birth and in our first few days, weeks, months, years of life. Anything that happens to us, we internalize, again, that's about us. It's telling a story about us. Right. But it doesn't do it with words. It stores this up as emotional memory. And you can't go access it with words, and you can't go looking for memory snapshots or videos there because it doesn't store it in that way. Now, our prefrontal cortex that can speak and use words and has visual memory didn't come on fully online for you and me as men till age 25 or so. So it was underdeveloped at that age. So the amygdala was doing all the heavy lifting. And it stores up this emotional memory. Again, there's no logic to it because there's no words. It's just emotional memory. That becomes our emotional operating system, the DOS, the machine language that all the applications of the mind run on top of. Yes. Now, the amygdala is wired into every part of the human brain. It is also hardwired into all of our sensory perceptors, our sight, taste, hearing, smell, with smell being actually the deepest and most profound one, and touch and feeling. So without us knowing it, that emotional operating system internalized in the amygdala, pre-birth, first few days, first few weeks, months, years of life, is what informs the rest of the mind of how to perceive self and perceive the world. Now, because none of us like to feel uncomfortable, none of us like to feel bad. So whether that's us as babies being hungry and not fed, or cold and not wrapped up, or lonely and not held, that all gets internalized and inaccurately interpreted that it's about me. The child can't do that any other way. Now, what a child starts trying to do, because this is what all living systems are wired to do, is it starts trying to find ways to deal with the discomfort. Now, again, remember, it's not using a thinking brain, it's using an emotional brain. Maybe it'll suck its thumb, maybe it'll cry, maybe it'll sleep, maybe it'll throw a tantrum. And it also, using a very primitive mind, begins to try to figure out coping mechanisms to prevent these painful experiences from happening again in the future. Again, all of this is pre-verbal, pre-intellectual thought. It's all emotional, using emotions to try to feel better right now and avoid feeling bad in the future.
And at this point, this is sort of humanness, right? This is
all humans.
This is happening to everybody, and
yes.
And I'm so I know you're. I guess moving towards the how that distinguishes into the nice guy syndrome versus an integrated or whole balanced person or some other neurosis.
Well, and there's so it's two things that I mentioned. How do I make myself feel better right now, and how do I avoid discomfort in the future that everybody carries into as children? Some people do it by trying to get approval and trying to avoid conflict and trying not to make mistakes, kind of typical nice guy behavior. Others do it by being oppositionally defiant, by pushing back. Others do it by being aggressive. Others do it by being extremely passive. But every human being, if they have wounding, will tend to try to find ways to not feel what they feel in this moment and prevent similar feelings from happening in the future. And then what tends to happen in late adolescence and early adulthood is that we solidify, we capsulize those survival mechanisms, those defense mechanisms into our personality and identity, and carry those into the adult world as if they're true, as if they're, yeah, this is right. This is who I am. This is how the world works. And then we all approach the world as if it is what our infant brain internalized it to be.
One of the things for me that was most shocking or jarring, you had a description in the book of someone saying, oh, he's just such a nice guy. Oh, he'd be the perfect husband or boyfriend or, whatever. He's going to make a great companion. I don't know why he's single. Those kind of, and this in the book, through your many years of interaction with individuals in therapy, outline with case studies how individuals tend to have this projected self of, don't rock the boat, easygoing, making sure everything's okay, sort of passive aggressive, but then underneath there's this, sort of this alabaster shell with this really rotten, there's addiction, sex addiction, and weird ways in which it's expressing under the surface. And then the tension between my projected self and this sense of bad self, underneath that's causing people to act in all of these ways in order to protect that core self from being actually seen, from being discovered, the imposter syndrome. That was so impactful for me because I saw myself in that, and all the ways in which I was trying to protect this image, of myself. How have you worked through that with men, and what's on the other side of that for men and women?
Yeah, man, you explain that so well because, as we're trying to be what we think everybody else wants us to be and hiding what we think might get negative reactions, the two biggest things that nice guys and nice girls hide, especially nice guys, is their needs and their sexuality. Because we grow up culturally with a lot of negative message about sexuality. And so nice guys start hiding that. And then the more, sex is the universal, essence. Everything is created, right? And so to hide that kind of life force, you can't. It goes underground and often comes out in kind of dark ways. Add to that is a toxic shame that nice guys and most people internalize at that young age when we think there must be something wrong with me to cause these uncomfortable things in life. I'm flawed in some way. I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. Wrap the toxic shame around all this, and all we can do is just hide, try not to be found out, try to be good, try to be liked. And that's why I start with every nice guy. And I say, they say, what do I do? And I say, the number one thing you do is don't try to do this alone. You didn't become a nice guy in social isolation. You're not going to break free from it by yourself. So I always tell them, go find a safe person. Go find a therapist, a coach, a minister, a rabbi, a men's group, a 12-step group. That's actually how I got started. And go start revealing yourself and getting more accurate feedback about who you really are. Start releasing this toxic shame. Start bringing everything you've been hiding out into the open to be seen, and find out you're not a bad person for having needs, wants, sexuality, and learn how to start being you, right? The you that you were born to be before you started, covering it up and piling on all this armor and weaponry and everything we do to try to both get love and protect ourselves all at the same time. So that process of just beginning to open up and reveal ourselves to safe people is so amazingly powerful.
Wow. And I, as you were speaking, I think back to so many times, especially around sexuality, I'd come up, I grew up in a time where it was a lot easier to be gay than maybe, the late 70s, early 80s were a heck of a lot easier than the 50s and 60s. But weren't there were no LGBTQ clubs in high school in the 80s. So it was still different. And I remember coming across people that were so comfortable with their sexuality that there didn't seem to be anything wrong with it. And I was in this sort of like semi-closeted, like everybody else in the world knew, like, you're gay. But I was trying to hide it. And I'd come across these people that were so comfortable. And it was okay, even if they had deviant, like they liked leather or whatever it was, like
that's deviant, man.
Just was like, wow, how could you? It just doesn't even seem that bad. It doesn't seem so deviant. It doesn't seem so. But it was my own interpretation of it that put this dark hue on it. So I love this instruction to just begin like revealing yourself to people to see that it's okay. There's a comment here from one of our wonderful guests who are watching that says, "I wonder what Robert thinks about the book Why Men Love Bitches." Are you familiar with the book?
I've heard of it. I'm pretty sure I've downloaded it to my Kindle, but I have not read it.
Okay.
So I can't speak intelligently about it, so I better not try.
Okay.
I often say I'm highly opinionated and equally highly underinformed, but I'll withhold opinions from books I haven't read yet.
Perfect. So I love this. I'd love to delve in a little bit deeper into how addiction plays in. How do these addictive qualities play into the nice guy syndrome? How does the syndrome outpicture as addiction and codependency in relationships? Yeah,
that's a good question. And one of the things I've been saying to men, and the men I work with, it's not unusual to have either alcoholism, drug abuse, often some form of sex addiction, often porn obsessions. And one of the things in working with men, I've come to the realization, and this is just kind of my own viewpoint, is that a lot of times what fuels the addiction is their shame about it. And for example, I've said to a lot of guys that are hooked on porn, I'll go, I don't think you have a sex addiction, you have a shame addiction. Number one, you aren't even having sex, you're spending all your time looking at porn. But because you've found a way, a shame compartment you can go into that fuels and is consistent with those deeply held emotional beliefs, I'm bad, I'm unlovable, and of course if the world finds this out about me, and you mentioned being gay, you probably had the same thoughts. If the world finds this out about me, everyone will be disgusted, and everybody, will treat me negatively. I think a lot of addiction fits in that same type of thing. I was actually talking to an addiction coach the other day, and he shared some ideas with me that to me were really exciting. Really? And he says that what he believes, and this really fits because it fits with what I've been coming to understand about plant medicine as well, is that most of the time we have a narrowing of focus. And this is kind of our human nature. When we're stressed, when we're anxious, when we're depressed, when we're worrying about something, our mental focus gets narrowed down. And my understanding is what happens is we start, the part of our brain, the default mode network, starts firing up. And now it brings our focus down. And the plant medicines have this tendency to help just get the focus off the ego, the self, the I, and open up focus. A lot of things can do that. Meditation can do it. Prayer can do it. Gratitude can do it. Being in nature can do it. Just changing what you're looking at visually can do it. But this guy I was talking to, he'd used that term, the narrowing of focus around addiction. So I asked him, can you explain to me what you're talking about? And he says his theory is that I think he would apply this to all addictions, is that we're recreating a childhood experience of trauma by going into a fight, flight, freeze state every time we're focused on our drug, whatever that might be, whether it's approval, whether it's food, whether it's gambling, whether it's porn, whether it's alcohol. And he said what happens is we get this release of adrenaline and cortisol, which are both stimulants, and they're part of our fight, flight, freeze mechanism. Remember, this all goes back to the amygdala again. Right. And what those things do is they narrow our focus down, and they activate our body to either fight, run away, do whatever to survive. And so he references that addictions is whether we're focusing on our next hit, when we're going to be able to go look at porn again, when we can go gamble again. It's this narrowing of focus because he said there's this familiarity of the brain of getting that in a sense, being in a traumatized state over and over and over again and getting a hit of the adrenaline and cortisol, and we just keep going back to that. So anything that we can do, and he has certain ways of approaching that can help widen our focus, whether it's getting it off our drug or getting it off the thing that we're obsessing about in an anxious state, or getting off dwelling on our past if we're depressed. Anything we can do to widen our focus begins to liberate us from that need to keep going back and re-traumatizing ourselves with those hits of adrenaline and cortisol. And which this excites me, because I've been working with people for over 30 years. And, when I got the invitation from you to come down and to Rythmia, I was so friggin' excited, because I know I have several friends that have used plant medicine, and like, I'm thinking, I think it's time. Yeah. And then I got the call. And so I've been excited about all the various ways we can widen focus and just get it out of that mode network, default mode network that I mentioned. Get us out of ego. Get us out of the me and my problem, me and my thing, whether it's my drug, my worry, my obsession. Widening focus, it can transform us. And so it really excites me to be kind of exploring this as a pretty new idea for me, in terms of how do you help people with anxiety, with depression, with addictions, with unhappiness. And if we can help get people out of that repetitive re-traumatizing themselves to get that old familiar hit of adrenaline and cortisol, we can transform people's lives.
This is very interesting. I've been, we deal with a lot of people at Rythmia who are working through addiction. I've had my own journey many years ago, and I deal and talk with a lot of people in my own practice who are also working with it. And one of the things that I notice consistently is that very thing, that the narrowing of focus, it's frequently that they want that, right? I want that. I don't want to think about anything else. It feels so good when I can when all I'm caring about is that next hit, or the porn, or the next play I'm going to make on the table, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Now, what you're saying is that it triggers the fight or flight mechanism, stimulates the disbursement of cortisol and adrenaline, because there is a sort of charge that you get when you give in to the addiction. But you're saying it's a fight or flight mechanism, but it seems to show up as pleasure. Can you?
Well, there's also, of course, in many addictive things, the dopamine hit that you get along with it as well. And I think that's what, again, going back to this addictions coach I was talking to, he says that's what most addiction experts have focused on, that saying it's like an addiction to the dopamine, to the feeling good. And that indeed is a part of a lot of the dynamic. But I really like the concept that the way he puts it. He tells alcoholics, every time you have the impulse to take a drink, he said, you're sipping fear and pissing courage. And he says, because what happens when we go into that fear state, we actually lose our courage. And he says, the liquid courage you get after 2 drinks goes away at about the 3rd drink. And so I really like that idea, because a man in my men's program that I'm a part of made a post that I read today. He lives in New Orleans, and he said this last weekend he was driving in his car. Some guy pulled up next to him, and they're going around a curve, and the guy honks at him, and he looks over at him, and the guy pulls a gun on him. Right, and this guy talking about this is when fight, flight, freeze mechanism needs to kick in.
Right,
and his words in describing this, he made a video to talk about it. His words were exactly this: my focus narrowed, and I knew exactly what I needed to do.
Right.
What narrowed his focus? It wasn't a dopamine hit; it was cortisol and adrenaline.
True.
That narrowed his focus, and he knew exactly what he needed to do. So this is a good thing if somebody's pointing a 9mm at our head while we're driving our car. It's not a good thing if we want to have a more relaxed, happy, productive life. It's not productive to keep going back into that state that narrows our focus down. Beautiful. Now, we need it at times. We just don't need it all the time.
And you're so right that plant medicine has the capacity to help us expand our awareness. because we say that that everything gets drunk, right? When you drink the medicine, your ego gets drunk, your mind gets drunk, your emotional body gets drunk, all these aspects of yourself, all the subtle aspects of yourself, except your soul. And for the first time, you really hear yourself speaking. That voice that's neither still nor small. We're just ignoring it most of the time, And as you then are able to finally quell those consistent nagging voices that pull us off course, then we can hear the song of our soul for the first time. And in that way, we return to a state of wholeness, to a state of a deep realization that it's not here that my knowledge comes from, but it's from a deeper knowing. And we say plant medicine done wrong answers every question you could have. Plant medicine done wrong satisfies the mind, but plant medicine done right eliminates the questions, because from a place of wholeness, then I know what's resonant with me. I know that this is the right choice. I know that this isn't. But very fascinating. In my own experience around addiction of all sorts, this idea that the singularity of focus and purpose, and I want that in other aspects of my life, right? How do we bring that in a healthy way, so that we can have that focus when it's appropriate, and also widen the aperture at the right times?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I was asked a very similar question to that yesterday in a group I was leading online. Here's my thought about it. I talk, and this is really a very simple modality. I talk about discovering your sweet spots and spending as much time in your sweet spots as possible, and as little time as possible in your areas that aren't so sweet for you. Now, this is different for everybody. And for me, I've been paying attention to this for a while. You mentioned I live in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. I first discovered this 21 years ago. And people say, why'd you choose Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, as opposed to blah, 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 blah? You've lived in Guadalajara, right?
Yes.
Guadalajara is not one of my sweet spots. My wife's from there, so it's not. I don't go back there very often. But Puerto Vallarta was a sweet spot. And every time I came down here from Seattle, which I loved Seattle, I grew up there, but it's rainy so much of the year. I'd come down here, and the slower pace and the sun and the warmth and the beach and the water and the people and the food and the culture, I'd come here and I'd feel alive, and I'd go home and get in my car by myself, driving in the rain, isolated. I didn't feel so good. So I thought, I got to find a way to get down here at least part of the year. I worked on that for 10 years before I could make it happen. Started, 6 months down here, 6 months in Seattle. I've lived here now full time for over 4 years. And because it's such a sweet spot. So I found a way to make that happen. I also found in time some certain things about me. I've been sitting on a couch in my office listening to people talk for 25 years. And I got to the point where, I'm ready to do something different. So I started finding other ways to use my gifts and do what I do. I also found, for example, that I don't do well when I got a lot of things on my calendar. When I get up in the morning and I see lots of things on my calendar, it's a kind of day.
Yeah.
And now I need to schedule things. I mean, you were on my calendar today. But I started making some rules for myself that I will not schedule more than 3 hours of anything, 3 client calls, 3 interviews. 3 hours is my max for any calendar day, and always in the afternoon. If I can avoid mornings, because in the morning I start out outside with a cup of coffee, watch the sun come up, do some meditation, and I start writing. So my mornings are sacred. Yes. Now, if I have to, I'll interrupt it. And so nothing in the morning. Only 3 hours. I leave 1 day a week appointment free on my calendar. And I've made a recent decision after planning a vacation that didn't work out, so I was home with nothing on my calendar. I've made a decision once a month I'm going to leave 1 week appointment free on my calendar.
Wow.
And the funny thing is, I'm more productive and I get more work done when I've got nothing on my calendar to interrupt me or distract my thinking and have to get in the mode for. Those are my sweet. I've just paid attention. I'm at my best in these sweet spots.
Love it.
Accounting, bookkeeping, and taxes is not my sweet spot. And I struggled with all of that for years, and I'd get behind on it, and it'd build up, and I'd dread it, and it'd bite me on the ass. And I've had an accountant, for years, and finally I switched accountants. He put everything in QuickBooks Online. He reconciles everything, does all the reports, lets me know what I need to pay in taxes, and I pay him $500 a month to do that, but that's okay. It's okay because it ain't my sweet spot, and I'll pay someone $500 a month to let me not have to be in my not so sweet spot, so I can spend more time in my sweet spot. So, like I said, it's a simple complex, and it's different for everybody. But if we'll start honoring where am I the happiest, the most productive, the most enlivened, the most energized, the most loving, the most abundant, the most grateful, those are our sweet spots, and we got to honor that.
I like what you said. First of all, I love what you talked about. I feel I identify, and interestingly enough, coming to this realization for myself, because I think I had this old story about being busy means I'm being effective, or being busy means I'm being a contribution, or just the fear that I don't want people to think I'm slacking. No, I'm busy. I got all this stuff.
Yeah, I got a full calendar.
Right. I even noticed how I wouldn't complete some things, so they kept lingering. So it even looked like I was busier. Right.
Me too.
So I've just come to this. It feels guilty. Like, how can I schedule only this much work? Like, I should be working all day, right? But
you should all night too. You should.
Exactly. But you're so right. When I've noticed just recently, this has been maybe the last month, that as I condense my work time and leave a little bit more time open, I'm actually more productive, more efficient, more on point, and there's a feeling of life working for me. Now, what's so interesting to me is the tension between, as you said, it took you 10 years to get that sweet spot in Puerto Vallarta. So can you speak a little bit to those of us who are maybe earlier on the path, right? Who have I know these are my sweet spots, but it might be impossible for me to limit my schedule to 3 hours a day right now because I'm working a 9-to-5 job. Or how would you direct people to move, as they move from where the tension between their curling at and where they want to be, and that transition?
Yeah. Well, how about we'll start with the idea that we're all on that path, right? Yeah. And maybe there's no early and later on the path. Maybe there's just more awareness and more taking full responsibility for our life. Here's a thing that's hard for people to hear. Life doesn't happen to us. Mm. We actually create the life we're living.
Yes, indeed.
And a lot of people, like you said, well, I've got this 9-to-5 job. Well, I've got a wife or a husband, or I got 2 kids. I got a mortgage payment. Well, who took out the mortgage? Who decided to get married? Most of us who decided to have kids. Maybe it wasn't always a decision. But when people will say to me, Robert, you are so lucky that you get to live in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. You get to do exactly what you want. You get to make a difference in the world and make a good living at it. You're so lucky. And I'm a smart ass, and I'll often look at them with all sincerity and say, no luck involved.
Yeah.
That was a lot of hard work to get there. Now, then I'll smile and say, yes, of course there was a lot of luck. It was luck that my second wife invited me to come down here to Puerto Vallarta when she was leading a women's group down here. That was luck. There have been, a lot of lucky things that have happened to me. But as some wise people have said, it seems like the harder I work, the luckier I get. So here's the deal. When people say, well, I can't do what you've done, or I can't do that because I've got this, and I got this. Well, everything we've got, at some point, we've got because we made a decision to get that. Right? We often think, well, this has been done to me, or this is just what happened. You have to get out of college and you have to get a job. No, I know people that go, backpacking around the world. What's the difference? How come they can go do that and you can't? And, when I've known people like that, I've never gone backpacking around the world. I think I can't do that because I've got this and this. I stole this from a movie, but called The Edge. What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done before, it can be done again. So anybody listening to this, if you're having envy of anybody else, maybe pay attention to that, because envy is toxic. It's a killer, but it might also be telling you where a potential sweet spot is for you and what you might need to start be moving your direction, because your eyes already focused in that direction. So maybe there's something there that you need to pay attention to. And so maybe if moving to a tropical climate, you're going, oh man, they're so lucky they can do that. Or if it's, backpacking around the world, just to be able to do that. Pay attention to the envy. It's important information about your sweet spots. Now, what some people do, because they don't think they really have a choice, they create these kind of pseudo sweet spots of eating a lot or watching a lot of Netflix or playing a lot of video games or smoking a lot of dope. They think, oh yeah, I'm happiest when I'm high. What they've chosen is these pseudo feel good for a little while places, because they're not making the bigger choices, the tougher choices. I had to walk away from a private practice to move down here. For a long time, I was saying everything I owned fit in a studio apartment and an 8x8 storage room. I let go of stuff. I made sure I got out of debt. I did things. I mean, even getting a PhD by the time I was 29, that was a lot of hard work. Yes. And there was a lot that went into that. Writing a book, it took me 7 years to write that book. It took me 3 years to find a publisher for it. That's hard work, but there was something in front of me that I just knew. I knew I needed to get that doctorate. Actually, I didn't know that till about the time I finished my master's degree. And I thought, okay, I got it, because I was going to drop out much earlier. Writing the book, I didn't set out to write a book. When people started saying, Robert, this is good, you need to write a book, you need to go on Oprah. And I thought, okay, this needs to be written, it needs to be put out into the world. And there was something about needing to be in Mexico. And here's the thing I found. Trying to figure out how to make all this stuff happen often means we just sit there and do nothing, because the wheels will turn trying to figure things out. But when I finally, because I put off the first time making the move to come down here for 3 months. I kept putting it off until the Great Recession hit, 2007, 2008. My father died in 2009. My younger brother died 3 months later, and I thought, no more putting this off. I'm going to Mexico. And I was down here for 2 weeks, and my sister passed away. I mean, all of those cemented. Don't wait. Take the leap. And here's what I found. When you make the decision, have the intention, and point yourself in the direction and start moving in that direction, doors open up that you can't even see.
That's it.
They just open up. I found a great condo down here. Other things worked out. I left the lease on my apartment back in the Seattle area. As soon as I did that, the manager said, oh, we've got a studio coming open at the time you're wanting to come back. We'll just hold your deposit and insure us when you get back. I let go of the lease on my office and all my furniture in it, everything. I let it go, walked away. And then a colleague took over the lease, and I said, can I leave my furniture here and sublease it to you in the summers when I come from you? And he said, yeah. So I got to go back to my own office, my own furniture, 3 nights a week, subleasing it from him at much less than I was paying originally. So doors opened that I could not have planned them better. But those doors didn't open until I started moving forward in that direction.
Absolutely. I'm reminded of I've just forgotten his name, the guy who wrote the Scottish expedition of the Himalayas. The quote was attributed to Goethe for many years, but it actually is John Murray. Until one is committed, there's hesitancy. And he goes on to talk about how providence moves in once you've made a commitment. And from a spiritual, universal spiritual principle, that if there is one energy, one source, in, through, and as everything, that we live and move and have our beingness in this creative medium that responds to us, right? That we are co-creating this with this energetic force. That I always like to say, let the how be the wow. We frequently get caught up in how am I going to get to Puerto Vallarta? How am I going to transition out of my 9-to-5 job? The how puts us right back into the logical mind and this sort of Newtonian sort of cause and effect. Well, I've got to do this to get this, and it takes forever. Versus this, what you're pointing to, you make the commitment, you make a decision, you make a choice, you powerfully stand in that choice and start moving in that direction, and somehow this creative medium organizes things unforeseen.
It's amazing.
Assistance comes that you would have never ever imagined, and this, I think, is such a beautiful truth that you've shared. I want to share with you some of the comments. I know you can't see them, but Angie says, "Love this, sweet spots, yes," and Paula says that she loves this, that we're creating what we are living. Right there is our power. So people are really, lots of hearts, lots of thumbs up from your,
cool.
your speaking, Doc. We have a few minutes left. I know you have another gig at shortly, but I'd love to ask you, how you've seen a couple more questions. In the men's groups that you've led, and I know in the book you do bring in examples of gay and mainly straight, but there are gay case studies. Do you see fundamentally any difference in the way that gay men or straight men are under the auspices of the nice guy syndrome, or is any distinction?
Not really. I gay men attend my workshops, and I because I'm heterosexual, because yes, the majority of men who I work with are heterosexual. That's the language that I tend to use, and I tell the gay men at the beginning. I'll often ask at a workshop, "Anybody here gay?" Because I want to know. I want to know my audience, and I want to adapt to my audience. And I'll often ask them. I said, the way I'm speaking about relationship, the interpersonal dynamic, sexuality. Do you see any significant difference in your world than the way I'm talking about it? And they all say no. Yeah. It's they run into the same crazy partners that straight guys do. The same hang-ups around sex that straight guys have. It's just no gay man's ever pointed out, "Oh, Robert, none of it. What you say just doesn't apply to me." I've never heard that.
I'm just, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm trying to read a comment here. I would love to ask you two more questions, Doc.
Sure.
One is what you're most proud of. And the second is, if you were in my shoes, what question would you ask that I didn't ask?
Oh, okay. That's a good one. I've never had an interviewer do that one.
All right.
All right. Talk about synergy. What am I most proud of? And I'm in a men's program, and we had a call last Wednesday. And part of this call was about death. And we had to break up into small groups on Zoom with just 3 or 4 other guys. And basically, if we were giving, we're on our deathbed and speaking to our child, or if we don't have a child, to some other loved ones. I'm going to tear up. What would you say? Well, I've got a son who's 35 years old. And the first words out of my mouth without even thinking was to say, "You're the best thing I've ever done in this world." And give me a second. And I truly believe that. I get emails from people every day that say, "Robert, thank you for your book. Thank you for your work. You've changed my life." I have men tell me all the time, "You're the most significant man in my life." And I know I'm making a difference in the world. I feel blessed.
Yes.
And I still think my son's the best thing that I've done in this life. Amazing young man, and he's an amazing father, and just he's a role model for me.
Wow.
Thank you.
Several people are saying how amazing you are. You're an amazing man. Both of us. I'll take it. Thank you.
Yeah, take it. Keep it coming. I don't mind hearing that at all. It does not bother me when people say I've changed their life. What would I ask me that you haven't asked me?
Yes. Oh
my goodness. I'm usually not for a lack of words. That doesn't happen very often. What? One question I've been asked before, so I'll ask this, is what advice would I give my 20-year-old self?
Okay.
And I think I would just say, don't be afraid. Whatever your mind tells you is true, test it, challenge it. Don't believe it on face value. most of the things we're afraid of are just the noise in our head telling us something. And, belief is just an oft-repeated thought. If we think something over and over again, every person believes what their mind tells them is true. And so if we just keep thinking enough about it, we think it's reality, but it's not. So don't be afraid.
I'm going to cut that and record it and have it like somewhere where I can listen to it over and over again. That was beautiful. It was beautiful.
It's yours.
And I thank you so much. I thank you for who you are in the world. You have impacted my life, and it is such a great honor to get to work with you. We've had great conversations over the last months preparing for your trip to Rythmia, and then to be able to have you on Rise Up. And thank you for the generosity of your time and all that you do in the world. And I look forward to our continuing adventure together.
I am too.
Excellent.
Thank you
so
much.
And thank you all. Thank you for all your beautiful comments. We have so many comments and hearts and thumbs up. And God bless you both. Beautiful, beautiful. God bless everyone. I'm reading comments here. So thank you all so much. Peace and blessings to you all. And we'll see you next week. Jerry's actually doing his Facebook Live tomorrow, so don't miss that. And then I've got Walking the Path on Thursday. And next Monday, we'll be back again with Rise Up. Thank you, Dr. Glover, so much. Wonderful.